We're proud to support the craft of journalism. UBS brings you the latest news from around the world with The Globalist on Monocle Radio. Be part of an international network that brings together leading insights, research and technology across 24 time zones and 12 key financial hubs, with you at the centre of it all. UBS. Advice is our craft.
You're listening to The Globalist, first broadcast on the 30th of June 2025 on Monocle Radio. The Globalist, in association with UBS. Live from London, this is The Globalist with me, Emma Nelson. A very warm welcome to today's programme. Coming up, we asked how much can Africa help Ukraine? As Kyiv makes a diplomatic push for help, we'll examine where sources of support can come from and find out why the move is being seen as another chapter in the war against Russia. Also ahead in the next 60 minutes, Donald Trump lashes out at Israeli prosecutors over the trial of Benjamin Netanyahu. How much can the US president's voice change the course of Israeli justice? We'll be joined by a Bangkok correspondent, James Chambers, to tell us more about the growing pressure on the Prime Minister to step down there. Then,
Japanese culinary traditions are so focused on the food, it's like a pleasure for the eye. And I think that Icelandic chefs have learned that from Japan.
We will be heading to Japan as we continue our coverage of the International Expo in Osaka. Today our focus is on the Nordic Pavilion. We'll go through the papers, hear the latest news from the art world too, plus
the idea to open the design world and connect with people.
Why bringing the old and new worlds of design is a passion for one Parisian gallerist. That's all coming up on The Globalist, live from London. First, a quick look at what else is happening in today's news. Iran has claimed it has the capacity to restart its nuclear enrichment program within months. Canada has scrapped its digital services tax hours before it was due to come into effect. And a French journalist has been sentenced to 7 years in jail in Algeria on charges of glorifying terrorism. Stay tuned to Monocle Radio throughout the day for more on these stories. But first, Russia's war against Ukraine has taken on a new element and a new geography. Kyiv is attempting to woo those countries in Africa which see Moscow as an adversary. Russia has for several years, as we know, engaged in a well-documented campaign of influence using both soft and hard power. Now Kyiv is getting involved. Well, to tell us more, I'm joined by Jenny Mathers, who's a senior lecturer in international politics at Aberystwyth University in Wales, and by Tara O'Connor, managing director of Africa Risk Consulting, a Pan-Africa risk management firm. Good morning to you both.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Good to have you with us. Tara, let me begin with you. What exactly is Ukraine doing in Africa?
Well, it seems to have relaunched its Africa policy recently with much greater coherence, and is actually opening, I think, eight embassies across the continent. Obviously, some very close to the area where Russia is most influential. And I think the most recent is in Nouakchott in Mauritania.
And indeed, just bringing you in here, Jenny, that Mauritania now has a Ukrainian embassy, and Tara was talking about having an Africa policy. How aware were we of Ukraine's Africa policy before this?
Well, I mean, it's been in existence almost since the mass invasion began in early 2022, but it hasn't been very high profile, particularly in the West, because we've mainly been focused on other things, and because the appeal that Ukraine has launched towards the West, towards Europe, North America, also countries like Japan, South Korea, have been quite successful, and we haven't really looked beyond, to be honest, the West. We haven't really looked at the global South that closely in terms of Ukraine's relationship there.
Back to you, Tara. This embassy in Mauritania, do we know what the purpose of it is, given the fact that, as it stands, Mauritania is experiencing troubles, conflict, difficulty with Mali, who are being supported by Russia.
Absolutely. There are a number of things. I think the first is that it's very, very close to, as you mentioned, Russia's second front, if you like, which is West Africa. And what's being on offer is both food aid to camps along the border from the instability that has been caused largely by Russia's influence pushing out Western troops. Something like close to 30,000 troops have been asked to leave the Sahel under Russian influence, I would argue. And so also Mauritania is right on the edge of the Sahel, and so there's also an offer of military training to help Mauritanians shore up its borders against this growing instability following the departure of most of the Western troops from the region.
Jenny, why would Ukraine want to get involved in a Mauritanian-Malian conflict when it is offering so much food aid and it is offering, as Tara said, training? And is Ukraine in a position where it can actually afford to do this?
Well, I think what Ukraine is offering is, in this particular instance, is technology, but also sort of lessons learned strategy. They're basically saying, look, we've been fighting the Russians all these years. We've learned a lot from that. You may have to fight the Russians too. We can show you their weak points. We can show you how we manage to take advantage of those weak points. We can give you tips on how to use different kinds of technology against them. So they're sort of selling their experience as much as anything else, and I think that is not as costly when it comes to taking away from the fight in Ukraine itself.
Is there any sense, Tara, that this is actually having some effect?
Yes, I do think so. Russia is under considerable pressure. It's also is under considerable pressure, and West Africa is particularly important for it to in its attempt to avoid sanctions. So West Africa has become very important in terms of Russia getting access to gold, which is also, being illegally exported through alternative channels and is actually indirectly funding the war in Ukraine. And Africa is central to that. So I think what we're seeing recently amongst the Ukrainians is a strategy, an international strategy that is making it difficult for Russia to operate and is also targeting its supply chains. And West Africa has become an important source, a supply chain for both Russian companies. And, we've recently seen, for example, in the AES countries, I think it was last month, we've seen the seizure of Barrick Gold, a Western-owned gold company in Mali. And you've also seen the nationalization of France's uranium mines in Niger. And at the same time, you're seeing these AES countries, the alliance countries across the Sahel, awarding Russian mining, awarding licenses readily to Russian mining operations. So I think behind Ukraine's idea is also to put pressure to support the countries around the AES countries and put additional pressure to put additional pressure on those Russian supply chains.
And Tara, staying with you, how willing are the African nations that both Kyiv and Russia are approaching and working with? How willing are they to get involved in what effectively could look like a proxy conflict, given what's happening in Ukraine?
I think it's already a proxy conflict in lots of instances with Russian military involvement in the region. But I do think, this new sort of more organized and strategic diplomatic effort by the Ukrainians can be very effective. Russia's propagandist approach, Russian propaganda has been completely unchecked across West Africa. And ironically, it has used an anti-colonial message saying that basically Western influence in business and etc., is effectively a neo-colonialism. So what Ukraine is coming out and saying is actually we are a country that has been invaded by an imperialist country that is actually... So that message is one that has not registered with many African governments. And in fact, Ukraine's experience is very much more akin to the experience that most African governments have had with their colonial experience.
Indeed, there's that sense, Jenny, that actually there's a kind of an alliance here that Tara is talking about in terms of Ukraine, saying we're just like you. Ukraine's also getting quite a strong business foothold into the region, isn't it? Because it is a major supplier of food to Africa.
Yeah, absolutely. And, I would agree with Tara, but, Ukraine is offering sort of a two-track strategy here towards Africa. On the one hand, there's the material benefits that Ukraine can offer, whether it's food, whether it's, technology, whether it's, advice in having to deal with Russia. But also, on the other hand, there's really important kind of messaging that's going on, sort of identity, common cause, saying we are also part of this anti-colonial struggle. We have very similar experiences. We have similar values. You should be sympathetic towards us. We are sympathetic towards you. There's a lot here. And so really what Ukraine is trying to do is both create more allies for itself and greater support, but also to, put Russia under some pressure, give Russia some competition in the hope that it will at least withdraw, some of the support that Russia has enjoyed from African states and possibly even reverse it entirely so that they become supporters of Ukraine.
Staying with you, Jenny, what is the likelihood of that happening, given the fact that, to all intents and purposes, conflicts and problems in Africa seem like a very, very long way away from the very hot war that's being experienced in Ukraine?
Well, they do, although, African countries have been very badly affected by the disruption in grain supplies from Ukraine. And this is a card that the Ukrainians have been playing, very, very much so. But I think a lot of what comes down to really is going to be who is better at selling a message. And the Russians, of course, have got the advantage that they've been selling a message for quite a long time. And they have claimed the mantle of, the successors to the Soviet Union and its support for revolution in Africa and so on. And so Ukraine has got a lot of making up to do, while, of course, they're fighting a war on their own territory. So it's a tough uphill struggle, but they are making the effort, and there are signs that it is having an impact.
Jenny Mathers and Tara O'Connor, thank you both for joining me on The Globalist. You're listening to Monocle Radio. It's 9:12, just nudging 9:13 in Tel Aviv, 7:13 here in London, and you're back with The Globalist with me, Emma Nelson. Now, Donald Trump has turned his attention once more to Gaza, having briefly spent last week changing the course of history by bombing Iran's nuclear facilities. The US president called this weekend for a deal to be made with Hamas and for Israel to get the hostages back. President Trump also lashed out at the prosecutors pursuing the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu through the courts, suggesting that were there to be a conviction, aid could be withheld. Well, I'm joined in the studio by Yossi Meckelberg, Senior Consulting Fellow at the MENA programme at Chatham House. Good morning, Yossi. How are you? How's the weekend been?
The weekend was good, hot.
Yeah.
But
and that perpetual feeling of what's happening next when it comes to what Donald Trump is now doing. This involvement, this capital letters, make the deal in Gaza. Yeah. It smacks of frustration. It smacks of impatience. What does he mean by that?
First of all, the pace of events is breathtaking. Sometimes in a positive way, sometimes many times in a negative way. And when, again, there is a different language, which is the Trump language, is that, as he said, I think going to be next week, which he meant this week, a deal. He should know, probably, because he's the one that put the pressure. So there is a chance. Netanyahu said in a speech yesterday that it changed the priority from defeating Hamas, eliminating Hamas. He used the word rescue the hostages, which we thought he meant releasing the hostages, which makes a huge difference what it means. So there is some movement there towards a deal. But there are some issues to resolve. For instance, whether Hamas agrees to the presence of the IDF along the Philadelphia corridor. Are we talking about a ceasefire or end of war? Is the release of hostages going to take place in one stroke? And it's going again a staggered one, and all of this again. The devil there is in the details, and above all of this is Netanyahu's corruption trial, and now the preposterous intervention by a foreign leader in legal affairs of another country, which this is Trump era, which everything is acceptable. At least to him.
Lots to go through what you have just said. Let's just wind back a little bit, talking about what Benjamin Netanyahu was saying yesterday. This idea that the Iran, I'm quoting it, the Iran conflict has opened up the possibilities of freeing the remaining Israeli hostages in Gaza. And as you said, it's that prioritization which has now changed, hasn't it? That freeing the remaining hostages almost looks like he's downplaying the goal of defeating Hamas. Is that correct?
We are 22 months into this war that all the time so talking about defeating and eliminating Hamas, that how many times we said in this studio that this is not a realistic objective, but releasing the hostages has been always a realistic objective and should be the top priority. So now it comes to that, and one assumes that it's under pressure from Washington. While we'll see how the right-wing elements within his government going to react to that. So maybe there is chance that I'm not so sure how Iran actually affect what happened in Iran affected, because it could. It's
not certain, isn't it? I was struggling to understand what that meant.
It's just words. It's just words to find the reason what to do, what he should have done long time ago. And what most Israelis says time and again, that's their priority. Then there is also talk, for instance, on, and Trump is promoting, Netanyahu implied about it, more countries joining the Abraham Accords. I can see more countries joining the Abraham Accord without any concession on the Palestinian issue and the Palestinian state. But, maybe we are into some surprises in the coming weeks.
We can focus now on this domestic political crisis that Benjamin Netanyahu has been experiencing. Is it 2019 since the first investigations took place into his behaviour? 17. My apologies. So this request for a pardon from Donald Trump, which now becomes married with an implicit threat of removal of aid for Israel.
I mean, it's preposterous, the idea that it's threatened. If foreign aid is not charity, it's supposed to serve the interest of the country that provides foreign aid. When you're not only intervening and say that another leader, another country should be pardoned, or he actually says that all the proceedings should stop, but also threatened with military aid, and then in the middle of a war, including with Iran, is ready to compromise the security of another country. I think only Donald Trump is capable of doing something like this. And now for Trump it resonates. All the idea of a deep state and the world is against them, because bear in mind, he lost some court cases in the United States that he blames the deep state and everyone on his back. And this is what it resonates with him, what happens in Israel. Reality, Netanyahu is not persecuted, there is no deep state. There are very well-substantiated cases in a court case. What Netanyahu is trying to do is to postpone it indefinitely and cynically exploiting the security situation that this court case will never come to a conclusion.
And this now places the alliance between the United States and Israel on a domestic footing as well, doesn't it? Because we saw the degree or the level to which the United States would commit to help for Israel last week with its sending of the B-2 bombers over to Iran. But the fact that Donald Trump is now able to give personal support to Benjamin Netanyahu in a court case suggests that this is green lights at every stage now for Benjamin Netanyahu to continue to do what he wants in Gaza.
Absolutely. And I think that he gets this kind of tailwind from Donald Trump, to continue and try to derail his court case, to continue the war in Gaza. We'll see what happens. Because, as we know, Trump is transactional. Trump can change his mind in 24 hours. They're a completely different policy. The relations between Netanyahu and Trump, Netanyahu is good as his last yes. And if he won't say yes to Netanyahu, this can change this can change very quickly.
Yossi Meckelberg, thank you as ever for joining me in the studio. Yossi is Senior Consulting Fellow at the MENA Programme at Chatham House here in London. Still to come on today's Globalist.
Japanese culinary traditions are so focused on the food, it's like a pleasure for the eye. And I think that Icelandic chefs have learned that from Japan.
We will head to the Nordic Circle Pavilion at the Osaka Expo, so stay tuned to the Globalist.
Each of us has a craft, a calling that inspires us. Whether it's how a coffee is brewed, a chair is built, or how money is looked after. There's a love for the work, a care that compels you forward. For us at UBS, it's about designing a unique outcome for you. Because whatever your craft may be, ours is built around helping you succeed. UBS. Banking is our craft.
Newspaper time on the Globalist now, 7:21 here in London. Let's hear now from Simon Brooke, journalist and communications consultant. Good morning, Simon.
Good morning,
it's
Emma.
Absolutely boiling outside, and yet you are suited and booted like I've never seen.
I don't want to be suited and booted. I've got to go and do something later today, and I'm absolutely furious with the weather for being 32 degrees or something, which is unheard of. Yeah. Well, actually, it is more heard of, isn't it? But there you go. What can you do?
Stop being sunny. Right. While you are... OK, you've got the top button undone. That's all right. We can cope with the next hour, next few minutes at least. Tell us what's happening in the papers.
Yeah, well, so Politico is reporting that Iran could resume uranium enrichment in just months, according to the IAEA chief. It's clear that there's been severe damage, but not total damage, according to Rafael Grossi. Meanwhile, the Times of Israel reports on a claim by an Iranian newspaper that Mr. Grossi is an Israeli spy and has called on him to be executed. This is a report. This is an interview that Mr. Grossi did for CBS News, and of course it contradicts Donald Trump's claim that Iran's nuclear facilities were totally obliterated. According to Mr. Grossi, reported in Politico, Iranians have a matter of months, I'd say, a few cascades of centrifuges spinning and producing enriched uranium, or less than that. So this is really difficult news for the Americans to have to hear, and also very worrying for the rest of the world.
Indeed, this line about the calls for him to be Rafael Grossi to be executed ties in with the announcement that the Iranians are now going to impose a death penalty for people who are seen as spies or hostile agents or agents for hostile countries such as the United States and Israel. This is a very difficult moment for Iranians because there was a real clampdown and indeed arrests and executions at the end of last week. So while Iran is literally dusting itself down, picking itself back up and seeing what the damage is, knowing that the centrifuges are still there, knowing that the enrichment program could be restarted, that suggests that it is absolutely bouncing back.
Yeah, very much so. And it's interesting that, according to Politico, Iran's ambassador to the UN, said yesterday that Tehran posed no threat to Mr. Grossi or his inspectors, and following this claim. And so it's interesting to see how the country is trying to sort of play down this story. But I think there's obviously concern amongst, certainly in the West, about the uranium enrichment program, but also I think perhaps amongst Iranian leaders about the effect that these reports might have on the Iranian populace and concerns about unrest.
Let's move to the New York Times. It has been following this absolutely embittered debate about the big, beautiful bill. You might have to explain a little to us, Simon, because lots happened over the weekend, and there was a sense that the Republicans had a very, very tough time trying to get their own bill through. Yeah,
Iran aside, these are more woes for Donald Trump. There's a bitter floor fight, according to the New York Times, that began yesterday in earnest after Senate clerks devoted almost 16 hours apparently to reading aloud the whole of this bill. And of course this is the big beautiful bill, the one that Republicans say will jumpstart the American economy. Other people point out that it basically involves cutting help for the poorest Americans, giving tax cuts to the richest, and probably a bigger concern for many outside the country that this will increase the federal debt by $5 trillion. So that's going to have a knock-on effect on economies, on the world economy, which is very worrying. So, yes, the debate grinds on. We've got some supporters of Donald Trump, obviously very much behind the bill. Senator Lindsey Graham, Republican of South Carolina and chairman of the Budget Committee, uses this phrase. It used this phrase in the debate. It's a big, beautiful bill if you believe in cutting people's taxes, securing the border and having a strong military and controlling government spending, he says. On the other hand, some Republicans are not so happy. According to the New York Times, Senator Tom Tillis, who's a Republican of North Carolina, suddenly announced during a debate that he won't be standing for re-election next year, and he will be voting, and he did actually vote against the bill on the floor of the Senate. So it shows how this really is a tortuous debate. And of course, we've then got this deadline that Donald Trump has imposed for passing the bill on July the 4th later this week. So it does really concentrate minds.
Let's move to the Financial Times. An astonishing long story from Kyiv about Ukrainian teens who are being groomed by the Russians.
This is such a depressing story.
Okay.
I'm sorry to start on a Monday, but it just makes me so angry. It just makes me wonder, to what depths Russia will not reach in this terrible war. Yeah, so that the FT piece begins with a description of a typical teenager scrolling through his phone on the bus, but it points out in his pocket, according to Ukraine's security services, were coordinates and photographs of sensitive military targets intended for Russian intelligence. The boy was arrested and accused of spying by the Ukrainian security service, the SBU, earlier this week. And according to the Ukrainians, the Russian security service, the FSB, is using the messenger app Telegram to target young users with offers of quick cash in exchange for their collaboration. In this particular case, the teenager in question was apparently instructed to take pictures of Ukrainian troop positions and send location data back through encrypted channels. And investigators believe the gathered evidence could be used, according to the FT, to guide Russian missile or drone strikes. So there's this young lad who now faces, according to the FT, charges of high treason and a possible life sentence. I mean, he's just presumably just wanted a bit of pocket money and a bit of an adventure, and now look what's happened.
And these are very vulnerable people, according to the Financial Times. You've got teenagers and young adults, but you have those who have been orphaned by the war. You have those who've been displaced by the war. You have those who are unable to earn anything because of the war, or they just want a new iPhone because they're 16. And it's just that feeling that these young people have been utterly damaged. A generation of young people damaged by what's happened in Ukraine is something that we don't really think about. We think about those who are who are on the front line,
who are fighting.
But for those left trying to just manage through life while growing up, is just the thought that the Russians are exploiting this is horrifying. You are quite right. This is a very depressing story.
let's hope they can do something about it. But yeah, I think you're absolutely right. It's not just the question of the physical damage done to soldiers and to civilians by the attack. You've also got to think of the psychological effect. And once, even when the war ends, let's hope it happens soon. Yeah, there will be a country traumatized and people needing presumably a lot of psychological support to get through what's happened to them.
Finally, you brought our attention to an absolutely wondrous story about travel requirements for different countries. We may have to stray a little long on this one because it's people are getting into a country is getting stranger, and it may be affecting our holiday list in terms of should we go to Turkmenistan, for example?
For instance, well, yeah, the piece in the Telegraph begins with reports from Japanese media that the country might have a requirement for travellers to prove that they have medical insurance, which I'm going to Japan in October. So obviously that grabbed my attention. And yeah, I have got medical insurance.
Do you have a history of unpaid medical bills?
Luckily, I don't, no. So that is another factor to take into account. So hopefully I'll be okay on that score. But you're right, if I was planning to go to Turkmenistan, which I'm not, I would still have to take a COVID test. Remember them? Why are they doing this? Well, I don't know. The Telegraph speculates that it does cost you $31. So for the former Soviet Republic, that's probably some useful pocket money. If I was going to Palau, which is a tiny Micronesian nation with just a population of 18,000 people, I would have to sign a special environmental pledge committing myself to tread lightly and minimise my carbon footprint.
Is that the moment after you've touched down in your enormous plane?
Absolutely,
okay.
Yeah, exactly.
Fair enough.
Yeah, but from now on, I'm going to do the right thing. So, yeah, it's a nice idea, isn't it? I'm not quite sure what... the other one I like, actually, is, according to the Telegraph, Canada is now requiring us to provide proof of parental permission.
For what?
Well, to enter the country.
Okay.
Wait, this is probably children, I think. Yeah, this is children. But still, would Mum and Dad, do you mind? I'm going to Canada. No, you can't go, sort of thing.
It's that whole thing about stopping people trying to nick their children.
Which is a serious problem.
It's a big, serious problem. Singapore, you're not allowed to take chewing gum or handcuffs. This is a grave disappointment.
What, the chewing gum or the handcuffs?
Well, make up your mind, but either way.
Whatever you're going to do. Chewing gum, I suppose I can understand, because obviously it's well known, isn't it? You're not allowed to just drop it, and what a good thing, definitely. But I was also thinking, really, I mean, there are countries ought to introduce some more regulations, shouldn't there? I mean, there should be a regulation against shouting at locals in your own language, expecting them to understand you. Could that be?
I don't. I'm just talking on your phone.
Talking phone really loudly.
With the phone head speaker on, and giving yourself an impromptu pedicure on the plane.
Let's introduce those immediately.
That's it. Simon and I have decided. Simon Brooke, thank you so much for joining me in the studio. You're listening to Monocle Radio. It's time now for the headlines. Iran has claimed it has the capacity to restart its nuclear enrichment program within months. Tehran has also warned it won't enter talks unless there is a guarantee it won't be bombed by the US during the negotiation period. Meanwhile, the French President Emmanuel Macron has reportedly held a call with his Iranian counterpart. Canada has scrapped its digital services tax hours before it was due to come into effect. The US President Donald Trump had ended trade talks with Ottawa because of the levy, accusing Canada of imposing unfair taxes on US technology companies in a direct and blatant attack on our country. A French journalist has been sentenced to 7 years in jail in Algeria on charges of glorifying terrorism. The campaign group Reporters Without Borders said Christophe Glaise had travelled to Algiers to write a story about a local football team. They've condemned his conviction as nonsensical. And southern Europe is bracing for a further day of intense heat as temperatures on Sunday exceeded even the predictions of weather forecasters. Southern Spain was the worst affected region, with the small town of El Granado recording highs of 46 degrees Celsius. There are wildfires in Turkey, and France, Portugal and Italy will also be hit by extreme heat later today. This is The Globalist. Stay tuned. It is It's 13:33 in Bangkok, 7:33 a.m. here in London. Now let's hear an update on the ongoing political crisis in Thailand. The current Prime Minister is facing fresh calls to resign, with protests taking place this weekend in the capital Bangkok. Paitongran Shinawat's ill-judged phone call with the former Cambodian leader Hun Sen has thrown her government into crisis. I'm joined now by James Chambers, Monocle's Asia editor based in Bangkok. Good afternoon, James.
Morning, Emma.
If you could just briefly recap the problem, starting with this ill-judged phone call.
Yes, that's right. I mean, the Shinawat clan and and Hun Sen's family of Cambodia, they have a very close relationship going back 30 years. But that seems to have fallen apart recently. And it's all come to a head over a border clash. Thailand and Cambodia are neighbours. They have a border that they haven't really agreed on. And so this has been rumbling on. And it tends to peak up when one of the governments has a bit of a problem at home and they kind of use it to distract people. So the Thais and the Cambodians are kind of fighting over the border. And Paitongran, who is the Prime Minister, she's Thaksin Shinawat's youngest daughter. She's 38. She called up Hun Sen, who she calls her uncle, to try and negotiate a peace. It was a private phone call, and then Hun Sen leaked it. And it's very embarrassing for her because she basically says, "Tell me what you want, and I'll do it for you." So everybody was up in arms in Thailand, and there've been calls from all sides for her to resign. The walls are very much closing in on the Prime Minister. And on Saturday, we saw the first major protest calling for her to resign. And everyone was looking at the turnout for an indication of where this is going to go. I think the idea was if it was under 10,000 people, then perhaps she'd have a chance of surviving. If it was over that, then it's probably going to build and grow, and she's probably on the way out. I mean, from the photos, it was a huge protest. I think the police have put it over 10,000. The organisers are saying it's more like 35, 40,000. And this kind of victory monument in the centre of Bangkok, it's like a traffic circle with a statue in the middle, was thronged with people. It was absolutely packed. Everyone was flying the Thai flag. Traffic was closed. Even though there was a huge downpours, it didn't seem to affect it. And so you can only see these protests building now over the next few weeks if she just to try and cling on.
So the big question that needs to be asked here is, how long do we believe that she's got?
Well, the Shinawats have a history of maybe trying to cling on to power. I mean, her father, Thaksin, got removed by the army in 2006, and then it was her aunt in 2014. And so I guess the key thing everyone's wishing now is that this one doesn't end with the army trying to step in. But there are many, many ways which she could be removed from power. And I guess these protests aren't the most direct threat. It's going to be a very busy week in Thai politics, starting with tomorrow, when the Constitutional Court is going to rule on whether it's going to accept or reject a petition to investigate this phone call, which has been lodged by a group of senators. So if the Constitutional Court decides to accept that case, then it looks like she's in for a bit of trouble. And they could actually decide tomorrow that they're going to suspend her. So that could be potentially an off-ramp for the situation here. And I wouldn't be surprised if they go down that route. And at the same time, Parliament's in session on July the 3rd. And so if she's still in the top seat, then the opposite, or one of the big opposition parties who recently left her coalition, are saying that they're going to launch a vote of no confidence. So those are a couple of avenues where she might be removed. So we'll have to see in the next few days, what's going to happen.
Just looking at if she is removed, who replaces her?
I guess the curious things about Thai politics is when parties go for an election, they each have to nominate 3 people who they might put forward to be Prime Minister. And so the Pheu party, who are the biggest party in the government. That's Thaksin Shinawat's party. They put forward 3 names. And Seta Thavisin was the first one to be prime minister, but he got removed last year. Paetongtarn Shinawatra is the second one. And so, I mean, if she's removed, that leaves only their third candidate, more of a party veteran called Kasim Nitsiri, to step up. He was overlooked last time when they went with Paetongtarn because he had health problems. And he seems like a very reluctant prime minister. He's come out and said if he's asked to do it, he can do. I mean, he staged some photographs on a golf course to show that he's physically fit to do it. But he doesn't seem to be putting his hand up that much, and he doesn't certainly have any of the kind of magic dust that Seta or Paetongtarn has. And if it's not him, then there are a few other people that other parties have put forward, and there could be some, a curious comeback for General Prayut, who was the military guy who led the last coup. He's a potential one. Or there's some of the smaller parties that are sticking in the coalition. But to be honest, if it's not Pheu man, I don't see it being anyone else, and perhaps they would have to call it a day and then go to the country for another election.
Thailand is quite used to turmoil in power, but what effect is this currently having? Because since day one, Paetongtarn Shinawatra has listened to calls for her to step down.
Yes, you're right. I mean, if you came as the thousands do to Thailand on holiday, you wouldn't notice any difference. I mean, I think you can come here in the midst of a coup and still have a good time. Things continue. It's very orderly, and people are very used to this happening. I guess at this time, it does feel like it could be the beginning of the end of the Shinawatra family, which has been a dynasty, a family that has, kind of controlled a lot of Thai politics for the last, or essentially this century. So it could be the turning of a page, and it could set the scene for the People's Party, or it used to be called Move Forward, to have another crack at trying to be elected. So Pheu had one last chance to kind of win back the support by going into government and turning around the economy. That's not worked. And now they're being attacked for, I guess, hand over Thai sovereignty to the Cambodians. So it does feel like things are, changing in Thailand, but on the streets, unless you're caught up in the next protest, which is likely to happen around the government house where Paetongtarn is holed up, you're not likely to see any difference.
James Chambers, Monocle's Asia editor based in Bangkok, thank you so much for joining us on The Globalist. Now, as we've been covering for the last few weeks, Japan has taken up the mantle for Expo 2025, showcasing the design world's brightest ideas. Well, this huge event is being held in Osaka until October. Today, we're shining the spotlight on the Nordic Circle Pavilion. 5 countries, Denmark, Finland, Iceland, Norway and Sweden, are exhibiting together. And Monocle's Ryuma Takahashi spoke to Ragnar Thorvardarsen, who's Iceland's Deputy Head of Mission and Commissioner General of Iceland for this pavilion.
I would say what's special about the Nordic Pavilion is that we are 5 countries that have come together. So Denmark, Finland, Iceland, Sweden and Norway. And we are collaborating not only on the pavilion, but also on the exhibition. So the exhibition downstairs, the Nordic Circle, sort of combines these 5 countries in the Nordic region together. When you enter the pavilion, brightness level goes down. It's quite dark in there. And the main attraction is the circle, which is a combination of these about 100 photographs that are from the 5 countries, people in their everyday life. And it gives insights into both the capitals, Helsinki, Stockholm, Oslo, Copenhagen and Reykjavik, but also, the rest of our countries.
Thank you. So let's move on to talking about the buildings. The facade looks pretty minimal compared to other pavilions, and I think this stands out because of this simplicity. And also, Nordic furniture is very popular in Japan too. So could you tell us more about the architecture and the interior design of Nordic Pavilion?
Yeah, so we are sort of working with traditional form material. It's like a big wooden structure built on steel beams. The wood is all sourced domestically, which is a part of our sustainability effort, that we've brought in the wood from Kyiv prefecture here in Japan. And traditional Nordic houses are built mostly from wood, and facade of the building is painted in this light black color, which is very traditional to how the finish on Nordic houses often looks. The shape is maybe not so traditional, but the idea was to give a sort of a feeling that when people see the house or the building, it's minimalistic. It reminds you a bit about the Nordic region. It's not very flashy, but it's like sturdy and sustainable. And the exhibition downstairs is a collaboration from designers in the whole region. So an architect firm from Finland, an Icelandic design company. The furniture is a combination from the whole Nordic region. Upstairs at the restaurant we have furniture from Carl Hansen and Son and from Hay. We also have in our main meeting room, we have a very nice Swedish chair, which is designed by Kuma Kenko or Kenko Kuma. So the pavilion itself, has all these design aspects, and those that come here can enjoy a bit of Nordic design here in Osaka.
Yeah, thank you. When I go up to the restaurant on the second floor, it gets so much brighter and feels like Nordic summer. The restaurant was so interesting for me, and you had Nordic food, but also things like chirashi sushi made with Nordic ingredients, but Japanese food. What do you think about that cultural mix with Japan, with Nordic countries, and also your country, Iceland?
I think that, this connection between Japan and the Nordic region and my country, Iceland, it's sort of like we can learn so much from each other, and we have learned a lot from each other, I think. Japan has inspired Icelandic restaurants throughout the last decades. I mean, as in most parts of the world, sushi is very popular and sashimi. But also, like, Japanese culinary traditions are so focused on the food looking good and making sure that it's like a pleasure for the eye. And I think that Icelandic chefs have learned that from Japan. Of course, our main connections between Iceland and Japan are related to the seafood, and people in Japan often don't maybe realize that the seafood that they are eating might be from Iceland or any of the other Nordic countries. Like, if you go to the supermarket and you buy keipelin or shishamo, very often you're buying it from Iceland.
Ragnar Thorvadarsson there, talking to Monocle's Ryuma Takahashi. You're listening to Monocle Radio.
IQ, EQ, and AI. 3 components key to the craft of innovation at UBS. Because to stay ahead in a rapidly evolving age, you need a partner with decades of experience, endless passion for the work, and a finger on the pulse of leading technologies, bridging human expertise with artificial intelligence, all to elevate you. UBS. Banking is our craft.
Now, fresh back from our trip to Paris after French Week, we're back in London, but let's continue our focus on the French capital for a little while, because Paris is a city which, although deeply traditional, has an inherent dynamism, and its design scene is no exception. Its ability to showcase a new while preserving heritage is remarkable. And one man who knows an awful lot about this is Johan Delprecht. He's the founder of Galerie Paradis. It's the largest space dedicated to design in Paris, and he stopped by Studio 5 last week to talk to us a little bit about his work. He began by telling me about the gallery.
Yeah, Galerie Paradis, it's a design gallery, vintage and contemporary. We launched this gallery maybe 2 years ago with my wife, and the idea is to open the design world between different periods of design, French, Italian, and worldwide.
So when we walk into your gallery, what do we see?
The most important, it's beautiful. It's a big space, 3 floors, and the idea to create a small space, very cozy, with all is possible to find in a house: sofa, small table, lights, art de la table.
And why did you decide to follow that idea, to create that feeling of cozy?
It's difficult. It's a feeling. It's not a big vision. It's inspiration, and we share this inspiration and looking for a lot of objects worldwide, and we share this passion, and it's our taste. It's not trends.
And the decision to mix the old and the new, what made you think that you needed to include all periods and all geographies?
The vintage cross a lot of period. Art Deco, 30s, 50s, 70s, you know. In furniture, in design, people stop in 80s, and after it's contemporary. And we decide to continue the period and don't stop, because between Art Deco and 70s, it's 40 years. And we decide to connect all. And the other thing, it's difficult to meet designer if you work in vintage. Charlotte Perriand died, Prouvé is not here. And the idea of Galerie Paradis is to be alive and connect designer with people. And with contemporary designer, we can create moments, share passion, talking about furniture, fabrics, and the idea is to open the design world and connect with people.
What comes first when you open up your gallery and you have a new designer? Do they come in and they bring objects which they have already designed that might fit in with the rest of the collection? Or do you sometimes have a designer who comes in and sees the archive of great design, and then that inspires them to create something? What's the story?
I think all is inspiration, and create from zero. I don't know if it's possible. And I think it's connection. My wife identify. Sometimes it's a art piece. It's not a designer. Always we start with the object, the furniture, and after it's a deep dive with the designer, the artist, to understand the work, the philosophy, the vision, and after we decide to work together, and may all start with the object.
And the importance of being in Paris, what is that? The way that what you do fits in with the Parisian design world?
It's an old world. I think the design in Paris is Les Puces for the vintage, and all the gallery in Rive Gauche. It's very close. It's very for experts. It's a small world like art or fashion, and we don't come from this universe, and we decide to open this universe and open to music, to fashion, to movie, to sports. Because when you like a good meal, a good wine, a good, fabrics, sometimes you like a good furniture.
That was Johan Delprecht, who's the founder of Galerie Paradis in Paris. You're listening to The Globalist on Monocle Radio, live from London. Finally, a bare few minutes to talk about arts and culture. Amma Rose Abrams is arts journalist and contributing writer at ArtNet News and others, and a regular voice. Good morning, Amma Rose.
Good morning. How are you?
Very well, thank you, and enjoying the prospect of 4 minutes of art chat. Let's talk about Croydon, which is not often a location that comes up on Monocle Radio, but go for it.
Quite. We have two amazing kind of seminal kind of contemporary artworks by the artists Arthur Jafer and Mark Leckie that have gone on view at Conditions, a kind of affordable studio space initiative in Croydon. And so at the Whitgift Centre in Croydon, you can go and you can watch for free without booking these two kind of really kind of important works of video art until the 10th of August.
The importance of this art is actually not to be underestimated, is it?
No, it isn't. I mean, we've got Arthur Jafer's work, which is a kind of, if you wanted to, a kind of video montage piece, a kind of operatic narrative that takes you on a kind of very emotional journey looking at race relations in the United States. It hits hard as a work, combining music and visuals to create something that's difficult to put into words. It kind of has to be seen to be believed. It's such an affecting artwork. And then we have the kind of Mark Leckie's Fiorucci Made Me Hardcore, which celebrates kind of counterculture, rave culture in the UK and is kind of an almost euphoric piece.
Let's move to Egypt, where we're having increasing delays on the opening of the Grand Egyptian Museum. We covered this a couple of weeks ago, and there were thoughts that it might not open on time again, but that's definitely been confirmed now. And this is now due to increased regional instability. I mean, we already have Egypt next door to what's going on in Gaza, but this is now a delay because of Israel-Iran.
Yes, I mean, they've just decided that they want to wait for what they're calling an appropriate time to launch this museum. I mean, they think that there won't be visitors because of the conflict between Israel and Iran. And I think they're saying there's no date now. It's just an appropriate time, maybe in the last quarter of the year.
What effect does this have other than it's that balance, isn't it? No publicity, even bad publicity is good publicity. It keeps it bubbling in the background going, this is a place that you need to visit.
Yes, I think it keeps it kind of top of mind to keep kind of coming back to us and saying we're still kind of making plans. We're still waiting for the right time. And I think it's also creates empathy. I think people understand that, this huge, £1 billion museum, full of some of the world's most interesting and, and kind of renowned historical treasures. People want to see it, but people also, I think, understand that opening it now is not the best idea.
And we have but a minute to talk about the Tate Museum here, or the Tate Group of Museums here in the United Kingdom, is trying to start a different way of fundraising, given the fact that we all know how difficult it is to get large amounts of money into big institutions nowadays.
Yes, I mean, they have added, including their grant aid from the government and from the sales from tickets, and they've added a kind of a fourth strand, which is an endowment fund. And they are trying to raise money with a focus on research, curatorial posts, and kind of in a US style kind of format to try. And I think the idea is to be able to plan into the future in a more concrete way.
Emma Rose Abrams, thank you so much for joining us, as ever, on The Globalist. And that's all the time we have for today's programme. The warmest of thanks to all my guests and to the producers, Laura Kramer and Hassan Anderson. Our researcher was Henry King and our studio manager was Elliot Greenfield, with editing assistance from Ryuma Takahashi. After the headlines, there's more music on the way. The briefing is live at midday here in London, and The Globalist returns at the same time tomorrow. But for now, from me, Emma Nelson, goodbye. Thanks for listening. Have a great week.